Indiana is headed to the national championship game. Welcome to IU Sports Sunday. I'm Nick Rotacap with you. I got back from Atlanta about maybe 12 hours ago, and it was 65 degrees when we set sail for the Hoosier State. Wake up this morning, and there's snow on the ground, and, well, shocker to none, including me, the roads aren't treated. But we made it okay. Hope you're staying nice and warm, staying safe if you're on the roads. Maybe give yourself a few extra minutes to get to wherever you're going today. Indiana football safe and sound back in Bloomington, the national championship game in 8 days, and for the first time ever, the Hoosiers will be there. Absolute, categorical, unequivocal insanity is the only way I can describe what happened in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl as number 1 Indiana ran past number 5 Oregon 56-22. And if I had a nickel for every time in the last 2 years that Oregon has gotten blown out in a bowl game in the college football playoff, I'd have 2 nickels, which is not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, and both times by a team whose feature colors include some shade of red and some shade of white. Of course, last year it was Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. This year, Indiana embarrasses Oregon in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, 35-7 at halftime. And I guess the only way to describe what happened was to thank Oregon for coming out after the first play from scrimmage, because it was a D'Angelo Pons pick 6. And that Mercedes-Benz Stadium crowd pop on that pick 6, the loudest crowd pop I have ever heard in my life. And that is not hyperbole. I am not exaggerating. That is the truth. I was on the field when Pons blocked that punt against Illinois earlier this season. And that was the first real test for Indiana, if you remember that. Indiana, of course, won that game 63-10. But that Pons blocked punt was a loud crowd pop. This crowd pop for D'Angelo Pons' pick 6, where he jumps a quick out route thrown by Dante Moore, takes it 25 yards to the house. That is the loudest I've ever heard a stadium. 75,000-ish fans in attendance at Mercedes-Benz in the ATL, and I'm not exaggerating when I say 70,000 of them were probably Hoosier fans. We didn't really expect Oregon's fans to travel very well, especially given, of course, that there is a very long distance from Oregon to Miami, where Oregon played in the Orange Bowl prior to this game. And that bore itself out. And, of course, Indiana fans, this is a sleeping giant that has finally woken up. Largest living alumni base at over 800,000, and they showed up. The players said after the game that was the biggest difference maker in this one, because you think about the first matchup, a lot of people asked them about that first matchup and what changed between October 11th and yesterday, or 2 days ago. 2 days ago, January 9th. And they said it was Hoosier Nation showing out. And I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it, but I really should. I really should believe it. I should learn to believe it, because this is becoming the norm. Indiana just completely blasting out of the way any sort of doubt or any sort of naysayer when it comes to this improbable run that they've been on this year. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Indiana is 1 win away from college football immortality, which, again, I was at the last game of the Tom Allen era. I was watching. I was not at the Akron game 2 years ago, and Indiana went to 4 overtimes with one of the worst teams in the country. I was not at that game. I was watching it, though. It was terrible. It was like pulling teeth blindfolded while somewhat inebriated. It was bad. I was at the Bucket game in 2023, which happened to be on my birthday, and I'm thinking this is a dysfunctional, sorry excuse for a football team. And 2 seasons later, they're playing in the national championship against Miami. And they're being accused of cheating by some folks online, which that's a new one. That is a new one. But, I guess when Indiana is good at football, they tend to break the minds of a lot of people. They tend to warp what a lot of people thought they knew about college football. But this is one heck of a run, and regardless of what happens at Hard Rock Stadium on Monday, January 19th, Indiana, this season will go down as one of the greatest, one of the most improbable in college football history. So how did it happen? How did Indiana so thoroughly run through Oregon? And don't let the final score deceive you. It was a 30-plus point margin of victory, but it felt like more than that. It felt like even more than that. I mean, you look at the ESPN win probability graph, and, well, from the moment Indiana was up 35-7, that was just shy of the end of the first half. Well, it was a 99.5% chance of victory for the Cream and Crimson. And that felt accurate. Just the way that Oregon's offense and its quarterback, Dante Moore, looked completely disheveled. Not even accounting for the lack of running back depth. Of course, that was something that was a big storyline before the game about how Oregon was without Noah Whittington, was without Jordan Davison, its top two running backs, either to the transfer portal or due to injury or due to illness, whatever it was. Oregon did not have much at all at the running back position. De'Aaron Hill, freshman, and Jay Harris, who had, I believe it was maybe 12 carries all year. Jay Harris had 16 carries in this game. 16 of his 42 carries on the season came in this game. So that goes to show you, I mean, this is an Oregon team that in the first game, I remember broadcasting it at Autzen Stadium, I had 6 running backs on my board because that was how many that they used. They used all of them against Penn State, it seemed like. When I was watching that game back, I'm thinking, okay, I've got a 0, I've got a 6, a 22, a 23, a 21. They just kept on coming. But Oregon only used 2 running backs, and one of them was a guy who had barely seen the field as much all season as he did in this game. Jay Harris was stifled by Indiana. 16 carries, 35 yards, a long of 7. And Oregon's rushing yards are somewhat skewed a little bit. The average is screwed up, if you will, because De'Aaron Hill Jr. ripped off a 71-yard carry at some point in the second half when the pressure was off. But, of course, we'll keep that in there because it's nice to give them a little bit of charity, I guess. But that was the longest play from scrimmage for either team. Not that it mattered, because by and large, Indiana's defense was phenomenal. Dante Moore turned the ball over 3 times, and that included the first fumble lost of his Oregon career. He had not lost a fumble since he was at UCLA in 2023, when, oh, by the way, UCLA and Cal faced off. Dante Moore versus Fernando Mendoza, Part 1. Part 3, Fernando once again gets the better of Dante Moore. Moore threw an interception, lost a pair of fumbles in this game. It's his 3rd multi-turnover game of the year. 2 of them came against Indiana, and the other came against James Madison. Or, if you were to ask James Madison fans, 1 of them came against James Madison, and 2 of them came against James Madison University Bloomington campus. It's a nice little bit that they've got going on. But all in all, Indiana's defense, Bryant Haynes, once again, he had never coached against the same team twice, had Bryant Haynes. Curt Cignetti, though, talked about it before the game, saying it is very difficult to beat a good team twice. And Indiana did it because of great execution, great coaching, a raucous fan base, making all kinds of noise. Oregon had to go to a silent count pretty early on in the game, which in a neutral site game, you don't see that happen very often. You just don't. Fernando Mendoza was nearly perfect. 5th time this season that he has thrown for more touchdown passes, 5, than incompletions, 3. 17 to 20, 177 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. And Indiana's ground game, they stuck with it quite a bit, as they tend to do, and it paid big dividends for the Hoosiers. 40 carries, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns on the ground for Kalon Black, who led the way, 12 carries, 63 yards. Roman Hemby, relatively quiet, 17 carries, 53 yards. And then Kobe Martin got some run late in the game. We did see some Alberto Mendoza snaps in the Peach Bowl, which is crazy to think about. Kobe Martin, 4 for 42, including a 26-yard rip. Kalon Black had a 50 or 60-yard run that was wiped off the board due to a holding penalty, which was disappointing. There was some poor officiating in this game. The holding penalty was not bad, but there was some poor officiating in this game. Given that it is an SEC crew that was on it, I'm not really surprised. And the Indiana fans were letting them hear it. And That was one of the things that's so awesome about Mercedes-Benz Stadium is it's an open-air press box, just like Autzen Stadium, actually. But it is an open-air press box, so you could hear everything. And again, I'm telling you, that crowd pop on the D'Angelo Pons pick six, the loudest crowd pop I have ever heard in person in my life. It was deafening. And I know part of it is because Mercedes-Benz is a dome, so the sound has nowhere to escape. It bounces off the roof and comes back. But still, ridiculous is the only way I can describe that. Receiving, no surprise, Elijah Surratt carried the bulk of the workload. 7 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns for Waffle House. And that was a really, really impressive 7 catches. He had Oregon's secondary in shambles throughout this game. I can't imagine defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoy, who is now the head coach at Cal, is going to be too disappointed about not having to face Elijah Surratt moving forward, because Surratt was getting interfered with in almost every target, and he still made the plays. And, I mean, I'm talking guy draped on his back. He makes a one-handed catch near the sideline. The only answer Oregon had for him was to interfere with him because they weren't going to stop him outright. He made them pay. Charlie Becker, a 36-yard touchdown grab, added another reception for 12 yards as well, 2 for 48 for Charlie B. from Nashville. Riley Nowakowski and Omar Cooper each had multiple catches. E.J. Williams caught a touchdown pass as well. And D'Angelo Pons caught a pass out of the backfield for a first down. Kurt Cignetti said after the game that he could take credit for that, actually. He liked Pons in that situation, inside the red zone, short yardage, medium yardage situation. I think it was like 2nd and 8. And Pons came out of the backfield because Cignetti likes his start-stop ability, says he thinks it's the best on the team, so he accelerates quickly, and once he gets going, he's fast. D'Angelo Pons caught a pass for 6 yards, which was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Fernando Mendoza had a pair of fumbles in this game. One of which was recovered by Pat Coogan. Mendoza did not lose either fumble. But one of those was recovered by Pat Coogan, which gave Indiana the first down, kept the drive alive, and ultimately led to an Indiana score. Coogan making all the hustle plays, which you would expect from a veteran leader like him. Very impressive is Coogan, leading by example. And we'll get to him and his story a little later on in this show. The Indiana defense, Bryant Haynes, once again setting them up in the best possible position for success. And the man of the hour, none other than Indiana's third-string defensive end when the year started. Take a bow, the sophomore from Lithonia, Georgia, Daniel Ndukwe. Ndukwe, a pair of sacks. He had 2 of 3 sacks for Indiana. And Dante Moore, again, probably not too disappointed he's not going to have to face Daniel Ndukwe again moving forward. Because Ndukwe was great. Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones each had a tackle for loss and a half. Elijah Hardy had a tackle for loss. Pair of fumble recoveries for Mario Landino, one of which was forced by Daniel Ndukwe. Again, this Indiana defense was fantastic, to use one of Fernando Mendoza's favorite words. And a bunch of guys who, as we have discussed, and as the media as a whole has discussed at length, not highly touted recruits, not very sought after, somewhat nobodies coming out of high school. Nobody knew who they were. Kurt Cignetti and his coaching staff set them up for success, and the guys on the field between the white lines made it happen at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl to set up a national championship appearance. Number 1 Indiana, number 10 Miami. Miami, of course, taking care of Texas A&M on the road in the first round, and then getting by Ohio State in convincing fashion, relatively speaking, and then defeating Ole Miss in the semifinal, which was a phenomenal game. We caught a little bit of it at the Media Hotel in Atlanta. That was a fantastic game. And I mean, this you want to know how much anticipation is behind this national championship game. The ticket price on ESPN via Vivid Seats, it says tickets as low as $3,284. This has to be one of the most expensive sporting events in American history, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I have never seen ticket prices this high just to get in the door. Just to get in the door. You can sit in a club seat for the very low, reasonable price of $18,000. I say sarcastically. But Hard Rock Stadium is going to be the place to be on Monday, January 19th. I'm trying to figure out the implications of if Indiana wins this game. I seem to remember back in September after Indiana beat Illinois saying that they were not only a Big Ten championship contender, but a national championship contender as well. It sounded a little crazy at the time because you still knew that the two biggest tests lay in front of them in Oregon and at the time Penn State. And we knew that Penn State was going to be a big test just because of the environment, if nothing else, and that was what proved to be the case. Indiana has handled every hurdle so far, and this team is so focused and so disciplined and so poised in these big moments because they don't treat them like big moments. Obviously, you've got the fanfare and the celebration before and after the game, assuming you win, right? But once the game starts, these guys, as they should, they treat it like any other game. And it all starts with what Curt Cignetti preaches. It's a big game because it's the next game. This is the national championship, obviously, and of course, Fernando Mendoza and D'Angelo Pons are both from Miami, but it's a big game because it's the next game. And for both of them, that two among many for whom this is the case, this will be the last game of their college careers. Most likely. Pons and Mendoza both draft eligible. They do have another year of eligibility, but they are likely not going to come back because Drew Aller is the perfect case study in what happens if you do not declare for the draft when eligible. And you go back to school and you get hurt, and then your draft stock tanks, and you make considerably less guaranteed money in the NFL if you get picked. So this will be the end of this era for Indiana football in Miami Gardens on January 19th. And I'm sure that significance is not lost on them, but I'm also sure that for Indiana football, going to the national championship game, they've been able to block out the outside noise. They've been able to play their game. They've been able to do what they've done all year. They've been able to stick to the process that got them to this point, to get to this point. They haven't changed anything, at least to my knowledge, at least from the outside looking in as a media member who's covered this team in person all year. They haven't changed a thing. They haven't. And I see no reason for that status quo to be altered in Miami. And a lot of people, in their eyes, this was the de facto national championship game, Indiana and Oregon. Because you look at Miami. Miami's a very impressive team, obviously, right? You can't fluke your way to the national championship game. That's not possible. But simply put, Miami has lost this season and Indiana has not. That's it. End of story. And Miami's path through the playoff, right? The win against Ohio State, very, very impressive win. Julian Sayin struggled in that game. He struggled against Indiana, too. And I wonder how much of that is due to Brian Hartline taking a head coaching job and then Ryan Day subsequently assuming play calling duties. But that Miami Ole Miss game in the semifinal, Miami committed, I believe, 10 penalties in that game. Indiana, I don't think, has committed 10 penalties, I would say all season, but I don't think Indiana's committed 10 penalties in the playoff or in the postseason as a whole, I don't think. Indiana clearly the more disciplined, better, more well-coached team than Miami. But it doesn't matter what the paper says. It matters what happens on the field. And again, I think unless you have a kidney to spare, I think you're going to be just fine watching on TV. I will be in Miami covering the game. All I got to do is figure out how to get down there. Flights are very expensive, but I don't think we can drive to Miami from here. I think it's too far. But not a bad excuse for me to miss class. Hey, professor, sorry, I won't be in class on Tuesday. I'll be coming back from covering the national championship game. Don't have to worry about Monday because it's MLK Day. No class. But I do have to worry about Tuesday. But that's a very first world problem to have. Indiana going to the national championship game in football before they make it back in basketball. That is not ever a sentence I thought that I would say and mean it, but here we are. You're listening to IE Sports Sunday. Back here at IE Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. And Again, I am glad that the national championship game is being played in a warmer climate than this, because it was nice in Atlanta, even though the game was in a dome and it was raining while the game was being played. It was nice not to worry about sloppy road conditions. But get back to Bloomington last night, and a couple hours after, I get boots on the ground in my apartment again, and there's wind whipping around. Wake up this morning, there's snow on the ground, and the roads are spotty. But I think we're okay now. And the national championship game forecast in Miami for Miami versus Indiana, 69 degrees and clear per AccuWeather, which I know we're still 8 days out, and things can change. Things can change, but we are trending in the right direction. High of 75 on the day of the national championship game, although, of course, it kicks at 7:30 p.m. So, Indiana, being good at football, has broken people's brains more than even I thought was possible. Because there are some schizophrenics on X/Twitter/whatever, the everything app, that are accusing Indiana of the C word, cheating. Cheating. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Accusing Indiana of cheating. This is some cope of the highest order, in my humble opinion. A lot of people have latched on to completely baseless claims, completely baseless, saying that IU is hacking opponents' Pixelot systems. Which, first of all, this is going to be a deep pull. I worked for USA Baseball in the summer of 2023, and we used Pixelot cameras for our automated live streams, where there would be a high home camera, and then once the ball was put in play, the camera would automatically switch to the field of play. It was a 2-camera system, very rudimentary. I did not think I would ever hear Pixelot mentioned by the common folk, if you will. Indiana is cheating by hacking opponents' Pixelot systems and watching practice film. What? First of all, there is absolutely no evidence for this. None. Absolutely none. There is not a shred of probable cause, let alone proof, to suggest that Indiana is cheating in football. And the fact that people would even turn to this, first it was, let's retrace our steps. Let's retrace how we got here. At the start of this year, it was, did you see how Indiana got embarrassed in the playoff by Notre Dame? Did you see how they crumbled at Ohio State? This was a one-hit wonder. Cignetti is a snake oil salesman. He's overpaid. He's a fraud. Indiana was a one-hit wonder. Then, Indiana struggled against Old Dominion in week 1. Shocker. Hold on just a moment. Teams might not play their best when their roster looks very different from a year prior, and they're playing their first game as a team. I know. Shocker, right? And then, Indiana beats up on Kennesaw State and Indiana State as expected. And people say, Indiana can only beat cupcakes. Illinois is going to show them. And then Illinois gets mollywopped by Indiana, 63-10. Illinois wasn't that good. Indiana's still fraudulent. Illinois was missing 72 starters. Their secondary was depleted. They were pulling folks off the street. Well, good luck winning at Kinnick Stadium. And then Indiana wins at Kinnick Stadium. And then it's, Indiana won, but Mark Gronowski got hurt and Drew Stevens missed a field goal. Now, those of you who are somewhat astute will know that great teams take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to them by their opponents. It's not Indiana's fault that Gronowski got hurt. It's not Indiana's fault that Drew Stevens missed a kick. Indiana, though, took advantage of Stevens missing a field goal And Fernando Mendoza took advantage of of Iowa sending a zero blitz to throw the game-winning touchdown pass. Well, Indiana's fraudulent. They'll go to Oregon. Nobody wins at Autzen Stadium. It's so loud. And then, Indiana won at Oregon. Well, so Illinois sucked. Iowa can't complete a forward pass. What's the excuse for Oregon? Dante Moore missed open throws. Just completely subtracting any sort of credit for anything Indiana did during the regular season. And then Penn State, Indiana's fraudulent. They barely beat a below-average Penn State team with no head coach. The only argument for saying that Penn State was not good was the fact that their record was bad and they fired James Franklin. But what people who try to push that narrative conveniently ignore is that Penn State has a bunch of guys on that roster that will play in the NFL, including both running backs in all likelihood, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. I know Drew Aller was hurt, so Penn State's offense wasn't even at full strength. Penn State's offense played, by and large, a very good game. There was some questionable play calling in there, but by and large, Penn State's offense gave them a chance to win. They did. Penn State's defense forced a key turnover in the second half. But what did Indiana do? They responded to adversity. Omar Cooper made the catch of the year to win the game. Indiana, as a program, had never won at Penn State before. And it's hard to win in any stadium, especially because there were 100,000 upset-minded Penn State fans in Happy Valley in that stadium, looking for their team to play spoiler, and by George, they almost did it. But Indiana beats Penn State. First win at Beaver Stadium in program history. But Ohio State blew out Penn State, ignoring the fact that game was played in Columbus and the transitive property cannot apply to college football games because there are so many variables. Ohio State blew out Penn State. Indiana's still fraudulent. Ohio State's going to whoop them. Indiana skates to the end of the regular season and then plays in the Big Ten Championship. They beat Ohio State. Well, how did that happen? Great defensive game planning, great execution, timely throws from Fernando Mendoza, good special teams play, bad special teams play by Ohio State, but Indiana took advantage, right? Indiana took advantage of the mistakes that Ohio State made and the opportunities that those errors presented. But after all that, and then after in the college football playoff, pantsing Alabama 38-3 in the Rose Bowl, and the big, bad SEC with those big boys and that physical, tough, hard-nosed style of football. It was 38-3. Well, that's not right. You see, the SEC is undefeated in hypothetical games. And everybody knows that an average SEC team would beat Indiana on a neutral field. I'm seeing here that Alabama was an average SEC team and Indiana mollywopped them. Indiana whooped them for 60 minutes. I'm seeing here that D'Angelo Pons rocked Ty Simpson so hard he fumbled the football. But I'm told D'Angelo Pons is only 5'9", 170 pounds, and he doesn't want to hit. That can't be right. That can't be right. So, after all that, after clearing every hurdle that they have faced this year, the Indiana Hoosiers are, let me check my notes here, they're not a one-hit wonder. They're not frauds. They're not products of a cupcake schedule. They're cheaters. J. Bud Davis was the one who kicked this off on X, Twitter, the Everything app. Before the game, 1:16 p.m. Eastern on January 9th, that was the day of the Peach Bowl. Friday hot take from Bud Davis, who, by the way, I've never heard of. CFB Analytics. If anything, he should know better than this. He should know better than this because the data tells you that Indiana is just extremely well coached and executes extremely well when it matters most, which I don't need data to tell me. I can tell because I've watched all 15 games. But J. Bud Davis says that what Cignetti has done at Indiana is so unprecedented and outside the normal I think he meant reality, the normal reality of what modern CFB data tells us to expect, that I suspect there is some kind of cheating going on. This isn't based on any evidence and is total speculation / gut feeling. So right there in the title, he tells you that he's pulling it out of thin air. But I'll humor him for a second and Bud Davis says, nothing like the ascendance of Indiana has ever happened in modern college football. Truly unprecedented. Wow, Bud, where have you been for the last year and a half? Where have you been? Obviously not watching them, because if you watched Indiana play and develop during the entire Curt Cignetti era, you would know exactly how this has happened. And I'll spill the beans for you in a moment. Bud Davis continues schizo posting and says, Indiana performs way above where they should from a team talent perspective. Like maybe Sig, with his handful of experience at the FBS level, just happens to be this world-class evaluator, developer, and game manager, or maybe he's a Belichick/Harbaugh type who is bending/breaking the rules to win now that he's finally got a shot. The they don't make mistakes part jumps out. He continues. We are now 4 or 5 posts into this thread. Maybe there is some practice taping or headset tapping or something else. I just have a gut feeling something is going on there. Or maybe, he continues, I'm totally wrong and this is some super magical moment and I'm missing the point. This just doesn't pass my sniff test. And then he cites a 24/7 Sports team talent composite that shows that Indiana's recruits aren't very highly rated. So 2 options, Bud Davis says. Again, I've never heard of this guy, but we'll humor him. Unprecedented level of overperformance that we've never seen before, or cheating. And then he goes to preseason title odds to try to prove his point. Because Vegas and the media before the season knew so much about how this year was going to play out. Let's see. Let's go back to our preseason top 25 rankings, because the preseason rankings are so accurate. And they are always accurate. Let's see. Let's look at the preseason top 25. Top 2, Texas, Penn State. Number 3 was Ohio State. 4 was Clemson. Number 2 and number 4 played in the freaking Pinstripe Bowl. Texas went to the Cheez-It Bowl. Georgia 5, Notre Dame at 6. Notre Dame missed the playoff. Oregon 7, Alabama 8, shouldn't have been in. LSU missed the playoff. Arizona State at 11 missed the playoff. Illinois at 12 killed Tennessee's dreams in a bowl game. Illinois didn't make the playoff, even though they were hailed as this year's Indiana. But yes, Bud Davis, preseason projections and data and odds mean so much because they're so accurate. Obviously, Indiana was only ranked 20th, and they're in the national championship, so they have to be cheating. He continues, Indiana would be the lowest preseason title odds at plus 10,000 of any winner going back to at least 2002, where the data begins. Auburn is the current lowest title odds winner at a preseason plus 5,000. Bud Davis, still on his schizophrenic tirade, it was so obvious that Cignetti was assembling a roster of old, veteran NFL quality talent. Why did Vegas have them at plus 10,000 and 247 have them towards the back of the Power 5 in the team talent composite? Kind of looks like a bunch of guys playing way above expectation to me. Okay, well, first of all, again, the narrative before the season was that Indiana was going to regress because of a harder schedule and the fact that they maybe or maybe not caught lightning in a bottle last year. And it was going to be very difficult to replicate. And it was. But it's not because they were cheating. Bud Davis still schizo posting. Again, I think we're 10 posts into this thread at this point. Now he just starts flat out lying. Quote, they barely practice, they don't have a player personnel department, no schematic explanation, they recruit based on experience and production, 2 things we have great data on, and Vegas has never been this wrong before. Maybe, just maybe, something's up. Absolute schizophrenic moron who knows nothing about what he is trying to be an expert on. That is Bud Davis. And the fact that he started this narrative, this isn't some niche post, this has 1.6 million views on Twitter. It was trending yesterday that Indiana's success was fueling cheating speculations. Okay, on the they barely practice thing, they don't hit much during practice. They keep their practices to maybe 2 hours tops, which former players have said helps keep them healthy during the season. The current players say that the short practices keep them fresh for games. And Cignetti has preached this from the moment he started getting asked about it last year, talking about how throughout the course of the season, practices tend to get shorter because, shocker, right? Football wears on you as the year goes on. No schematic explanation. Okay. You want to know Indiana's schematic explanation? It's very simple on offense, I'll tell you that much. They tend to lean on the run, right? And bear with me here. Once you start to bite on the run, they beat you over the top. And if they can't beat you over the top, then their quarterback, who will be drafted first overall in April, makes quick throws with anticipation to, by and large, where only his receivers have a chance to make a play. Is that cheating? If that's cheating, then I guess every successful offense in college football is cheating. On the defensive side, Bryant Haynes is a magician. Why do you think Curt Cignetti has kept him around for over a decade? Who did Cignetti have as his defensive coordinator before Bryant Haynes got promoted? It was Corey Heatherman. Corey Heatherman is Miami's defensive coordinator. Miami is also in the national championship game. Maybe Curt Cignetti is a really good football mind who comes from the greatest coaching tree in history, and by virtue of that, is a great assessor of football intelligence, IQ, and talent. Who did Curt Cignetti recruit at Alabama again? He recruited Mark Ingram and Julio Jones. And you're trying to tell me that Curt Cignetti doesn't have an eye for talent? I don't get it. I just don't get it. They recruit based on experience and production. Okay, but let's not distort the facts here, right? Cignetti recruited Curtis Rourke to run Indiana's offense. Rourke was the 2022 MAC Player of the Year, but he was coming off a knee injury. And the MAC is not the top level of FBS football. But any other team could have recruited Curtis Rourke if they wanted to. Cignetti, this is the part that gets conveniently ignored by a lot of people about how Cignetti built this roster. A lot of these guys were not just fifth-year veterans that he snatched up out of thin air. He brought them over from James Madison. Elijah Surratt was a zero-star recruit who began his career at an FBS program that no longer exists because they dropped down to the Division III level. St. Francis. Then he went to James Madison for a year, and Cignetti brought him from there to Indiana. Kalon Black, James Madison. D'Angelo Pons, James Madison. Aiden Fisher, Mikhail Kamara, James Madison. It's not like Cignetti just snatched these guys up or Indiana gave them the largest check out of anybody, or somehow they're cheating to have this success. They are well prepared because they are well coached. They pick up on tendencies. Again, the clip of D'Angelo Pons' pick six is being used by some schizophrenic morons as cheating evidence. Because D'Angelo Pons called out a pass before the snap. If only there was some sort of way that you could pick up on an opponent's tendencies by watching what they do in certain formations leading up to the game. I wonder what that's called. Film study? Something like that, right? Scouting? Using game film, right? Is that some novel concept to you? The receiver was lined up tight to the line of scrimmage, which Pons said was a tell. And then Dante Moore takes the snap, drops back, and stares down his receiver the entire time. If a quarterback has tunnel vision on one guy from the moment he catches the snap, that's probably where the ball is going. I have never played a down of tackle football in my life, and I know that. Pons also, shocker, knows that. Great instincts, great vision, sees it, jumps the route, intercepts the pass, takes it to the house. Is this rocket science? And part of his cheating speculation, Bud Davis, Vegas has never been this wrong before. We're using odds. Again, the preseason projections across the board were so accurate this year, right? So accurate. If I had to guess, I'm not going to look at the odds. Actually, you know what? We will. We will look at the preseason title odds. Because they were probably just so dead on outside of Indiana, right? So dead on. For the entirety of Indiana. For the entirety of the country. I seriously doubt it, because if I remember correctly, Texas was the odds-on favorite. Texas was the odds-on favorite. Texas, Penn State, LSU, Clemson, all up there. Because they were expected to either pick up where they left off or build on what they accomplished the year before. Or build on it. We'll go back. We will go back. Preseason odds. Texas Tech was up there at plus 525. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Miami plus 3,000, Oregon plus 900, Georgia plus 700. So a lot of the teams that you see up there were projected to build on what they did last year, right? Texas had a lot of preseason hype because of Arch Manning, right? As we know, that's not what happened. Bud Davis, I offer you this. Indiana, not cheating. If you have watched this team for the entirety of the Curt Cignetti era, you know that they are well coached. They are held to the highest standards of accountability and execution and preparation. There is an unprecedented level of buy-in on this team. Unprecedented. You listen to the players that stayed here after Tom Allen was fired, and they tell you that they all made the decision to stay because they liked what Curt Cignetti was bringing to the table in terms of his philosophy, in terms of his vision, and his determination to turn college football's perennial doormat into a powerhouse. And you can argue that the schedule last year was very favorable, but I would also argue that the progression was not linear. The progression was not just meteoric for Indiana, although that is the word that a lot of people use to describe this rise. It was somewhat iterative. Indiana won the big games, but not the biggest games last year. You think about the homecoming game against Nebraska, the game against Washington, the game against Michigan. Were those teams a little downtrodden? Yes. But Indiana won them to prove that they could win those kinds of games. They lost the biggest games, right? They fell on their face at Ohio State. They didn't have a chance against Notre Dame. Wow, those teams played for the national championship later on. It's almost like outside of Northern Illinois and Michigan, nobody had a chance against them. But Indiana built on that. The guys who came back said that the experience was not pleasant, but it was important for their development. Curt Cignetti said before the Ohio State game this year that game in Columbus in November of 2024, that moment was too big for that team. But they needed it to develop and learn what it takes to win at that level, a lot of which hinges on not making avoidable mistakes. Self-inflicted wounds killed Indiana in both of those games. You think about the dropped snap on a punt deep in their own territory against Ohio State, which was caused by a phantom false start that may or may not have happened. You think about giving up a gain of 25 on 3rd and 35 against Ohio State. You think about against Notre Dame, Curtis Rourke throwing an interception deep in Notre Dame territory, and then Indiana missing an assignment on the very first play of the subsequent Notre Dame drive that led to a 98-yard touchdown run from Jeremiah Love. You think about Indiana's poor offensive line play in those big games last year. What did Indiana do in the transfer portal? They addressed the offensive line. Not because they were cheating, but because they saw a need based on the film and based on the results, and they knew how to address it. Oh, Notre Dame doesn't want Pat Coogan anymore? Bring him to Bloomington. He's experienced, he's been successful, and he knows how to win. Right? Bring in Zen Michalski for some depth. Bring back Khalil Benson, who did not get treated fairly at Colorado, but was previously at Indiana. Okay, cool. The offensive line is addressed. That's great. Everybody who was on those big stages for the first time last year has gotten better at handling those moments. And there were more of those moments this year. Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, all back-to-back-to-back games. As opposed to 2024, you had to wait until nearly the end of the season to play in a game of that magnitude. You get 3 in a row at the start of conference play? Yeah, that helps. And it's not rocket science. Indiana has built on everything throughout the last 2 years. The first big win they had was UCLA, if nothing else, just to prove that they could win on a national stage. Not because UCLA was a good team, but because Indiana had not been in that situation in a while. Just playing on national TV with a chance to win. That's where we were in September of 2024. But to suggest that Indiana is cheating based on absolutely no evidence, that's grounds for a lawsuit. That's libelous. You can't just throw these things around willy-nilly saying that they're hacking Pixelot, stealing practice film, intercepting helmet communications. That was another thing that was thrown out there, was that Fernando Mendoza's helmet speaker broke against Alabama because of interfering radio frequencies. And no, I'm not kidding. Somebody actually suggested that. Well, I'll offer you this suggestion. How about no? Why would Indiana go through all that trouble to cheat and then pay their coaching staff what they're being paid if you just know you're going to get caught? Because Michigan got caught. They tried to hide it. They couldn't do it. And then Jim Harbaugh left town before he could face any sort of accountability. Why would Curt Cignetti wait until he's almost 65 years old for his first head coaching opportunity at the Power 4 level and then throw it away by cheating? Completely ridiculous and moronic take. Indiana is well coached. They do not shoot themselves in the foot. They take advantage of the opportunities that their opponents give them. That's what they've done all year long. Fernando Mendoza throws with anticipation behind an offensive line that has kept his jersey very clean this season. Because Indiana's offensive linemen play with great technique. They play with great footwork. They play with great agility. There's a reason that Cignetti kept around Bob Bostad and only Bob Bostad from Tom Allen's staff. There's a reason that Bryant Haynes is now one of the highest paid assistant coaches in the country and will probably win the Broyles Award. He was a finalist for it last year. I think he did win it. There are so many awards that Indiana's won this year. I think Bryant Haynes did win the Broyles Award. It's not rocket science. Indiana doesn't have the most talented roster. We know that. That was a big reason why a lot of people didn't think they would hold up against the likes of Oregon and Ohio State. It's not that they have the most talented roster on paper. It's that the roster that they have is extremely tailored to the schematic things that make them successful, especially on defense. Bryant Haynes allows them to play free, allows them to play fast. For the players, he keeps the scheme simple enough to where they know exactly what they're doing on every play. They scout their opponents based on game film. Based on game film, they pick up tendencies. They notice those tendencies. They notice tells in game. They make the adjustments and they make the plays. It's not rocket science. It is not rocket science. And I'll tell you one thing for sure. Indiana is certainly not cheating. And suggesting that they are is moronic and maybe grounds for legal action, depending on whose ears it reaches and how much traction it gains. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. And it's just so absurd that I feel the need to again debunk it. Indiana is apparently cheating in football. That's the rumor that people are throwing around without a shred of evidence. Without a shred of evidence. If you've got Michigan fans chiming in support of Indiana saying that there isn't a chance that they're cheating, then you know that you completely lost the plot. One more thing on that before the end of the first hour. After the game, Will Stein, Oregon's offensive coordinator, now the head coach at Kentucky, said that play that Oregon ran on the first play from scrimmage, which resulted in a pick six for D'Angelo Pons, had been a great drive starter for Oregon all season long. Again, it's not hard. You can watch the film and see, oh, wow, Oregon lines up in this formation where the left side receiver is tied to the line of scrimmage. Might be that 5-yard out route. And then Dante Moore looks back and stares down his receiver the entire time. It's a 5-yard out route. Wow, D'Angelo Pons, one of the best cover corners in the country. Oh, he jumps the route. Wow, Indiana's cheating. Obviously, right? What a joke. What a joke. What a joke. Indiana football, as I've said, being successful has completely broken everyone's brains on a national level in college football. Just keep winning, man. Just keep winning. Just keep winning. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the ultimate compliment that some folks have paid IU football, that they're cheating. Yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. I guess you're right. Indiana doesn't have the most talented players. All of their players that they do have are seventh-year super seniors who should be working on an oil rig somewhere in the Gulf. They're cheating. Sorry, guys. Season's canceled. Miami, you win the national championship. Yep. You know what? Yeah. Why not? Why even watch the games if you're just going to box score watch and say, oh, no, they're cheating. They're cheating. Obviously, they're cheating, right? Can't we just enjoy something nice? This is something that a lot of people have pointed out, and it's a very valid point. We celebrate newcomers in college basketball. We celebrate teams that find success after a long existence in relative purgatory in college basketball. Oakland, for example, making that run, upsetting Kentucky. Thank you, Jack Golke, in the NCAA tournament. Right? We celebrate, what was it, UMBC beating Virginia, Fairleigh Dickinson beating Purdue, St. Peter's, Doug Edert going on that run, North Texas beating Purdue. A lot of these are just Purdue losing. But we celebrate those kinds of things in college basketball. Loyola and Sister Jean, right? We celebrate these things. But in college football, if it's not the big, bad SEC or the Ohio State University or the Maize and Blue, nope, sorry, you can't enjoy your success. Obviously, there is something stinky afoot. The only thing that's stinky is what's going on in the SEC, the armpit of college football right now. That's what's stinky, if you ask me. That's what's stinky. And again, I do not claim to be the brightest football mind, right? But I feel like, again, if Oregon's offensive coordinator says that a 5-yard out route has been a great drive starter for his team all year, my guess is that Indiana knew that too. My guess is that, how easy is it to go back on the game film and cut up the first play of every single game this year? Oh, that's pretty easy. Give me access to the All-22 and an Adobe Premiere license, and I can do that in probably about 10 minutes tops. And then you watch them all, and you notice, oh, wow, that's curious. They run that play a lot. There's a guy on Twitter named Buffton Prime TCal, who is a former football player. He is friends with D'Angelo Pons. He's been a D'Angelo Pons truther for a long time. He sent D'Angelo Pons All-22 film of that exact play that I think Oregon ran it against Texas Tech. Shocker. And said that's a 3-step pick six. Because Dante Moore, stares down his reads quite a bit. Stares down his options. Holds the ball for too long. If his first read isn't open, he panics. It happened against Indiana both times Oregon played them this year, including in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl when Indiana won 56-22 to advance to the national championship and simultaneously breaking even more minds across the country in college football. Bryant Haynes confused Dante Moore like crazy the first time these teams played. He took multiple coverage sacks. He missed wide open guys where if he would have thrown them the ball, and he had the time, but he missed the reads because of the pressure packages that Indiana brought. Dante Moore has had trouble playing against Bryant Haynes' defenses this year. It's not a shocker, then, that Haynes was able to do it again. It's not. It's not. Why do you think Bryant Haynes has been getting head coaching interest each of the last 2 years? It's because he's a really freaking good coach. He's a really good coach. And again, if former players who have access to the film can see Oregon's tendencies, then I have no doubt in my mind that Indiana can too. But it's good to know that Miami fans have gotten out in front of potentially losing in the national championship game by saying, Indiana's cheating, so it's okay. It's okay. We can huff some copium there, I guess, right? Yeah. It's like Michigan 2 years ago. I guess Washington claimed some moral victory because Michigan was busted for cheating. Which, I mean, the NCAA didn't strip the championship. At least not yet. Well, the NCAA doesn't control the CFP. But those wins have not been vacated. And unless there's something that I'm missing. If Indiana is, I will make a bet with all of you naysayers who maybe watched Indiana for the first time at the Peach Bowl when they put a whooping on Oregon. If Indiana is found to have cheated at any point during the Curt Cignetti era, I will donate. How much money will I donate? For however many wins Indiana vacates, I will multiply that number by 100 and donate that money to charity. I'll multiply it by 100. Say, for example, Indiana wins, let's say, 30 games in the Cignetti era. I think they're going to win more than that. They're only, I think, maybe 3 or 4 wins away from 30. Let's say 30 is a hypothetical number, right? I would donate $3,000 to charity. That's how confident I am this won't happen. I'm a college student. $3,000 is a little bit different for me than it is for other people, right? Other people who, have been working for longer than I've been alive, right? That's my bet. If Indiana is found to have cheated at any point, I will donate the win total times 10 to a charity of my own choosing, probably Gleaners or Salvation Army or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure out the logistics. Never, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Again, I will tell you how Indiana beat Oregon. 56-22 the final. It was 35-7 at halftime. I will tell you how they did it. They took advantage of the mistakes that Oregon made, also took advantage of the fact that Oregon was dealing with a lot of extracurriculars in the lead up to this game. Multiple running backs in the transfer portal. Both coordinators having to play double duty because of the broken college football calendar, having to play double duty at their new head coaching gigs, which they have now assumed full time. Tosh Lupoi, defensive coordinator, goes to Cal. Offensive coordinator Will Stein goes to Kentucky. And especially Will Stein, when Oregon got to Atlanta, he didn't look like he had slept a wink in about 2 weeks. The college football calendar is broken, but that's not Indiana's fault. That's not anything to do with Indiana. You handle the situation as best you can. Curt Cignetti said, oh yeah, I lost about 10 hours of prep over 2 days due to hosting transfer portal visits in the lead up to the Oregon game. He said it is what it is. You make the best of it, right? You handle it. Indiana's on fire in the portal right now, by the way. Absolutely on fire. Headline acquisition, Nick Marsh, wide receiver out of Michigan State, who torched Indiana in one form or another the last 2 years that Indiana played the Spartans for the old brass spittoon. I'd love to live in a fantasy world where I can just speak things into existence and make them come true and ignore the facts. The fact is, on offense, Fernando Mendoza has never at Indiana been big on volume. His success comes through efficiency, timely plays. What happened against Oregon? He didn't throw the ball a ton. Indiana ran the ball twice as much as Mendoza threw it. 40 rushing attempts, 20 passing attempts. Mendoza was on time, in rhythm, extremely accurate. And Indiana's passing plays, the big ones, came when they needed them. And Mendoza gives his receivers, who, by the way, are some of the best in the country, the opportunity to make plays on the ball where only they have a chance to do so. He throws with anticipation. He throws in rhythm. Why does he look so connected with Elijah Surratt? It's not because Indiana's cheating. I don't even know how you cheat that. How would you cheat a 10-yard out route? Beats me. I'll tell you what Fernando Mendoza has told us throughout the season. He's out there throwing with his receivers. Yes, that includes Elijah Surratt. Before and after practice. They were doing this a year ago. Right after he got to Bloomington. They were putting in extra work. Shocker. Preparation pays off. More at 11. That's how Mendoza looks so in rhythm. That's how he does it. On the defensive side, these guys have told us, yeah, Aiden Fisher said prior to the college football playoff, there's not a team that we're going to play from here on out that recruited any of us. And you don't think that fuels the fire a little bit? Because I'll tell you, it absolutely does. It absolutely does fuel the fire. Oh, all of these programs that are represented in the college football playoff didn't think that we were good enough. Didn't think that we were good enough to play for them. Whether or not the coaching staffs were the same is irrelevant. The bottom line is, Aiden Fisher and everybody else, they see that Alabama logo, they see that Oregon logo, and they think, man, you didn't think I was good enough for you. I'm going to prove you wrong. They play with a chip on their shoulder. They play fast. They play high effort. I mean, it's something as simple as Pat Coogan, the Indiana center, sprinting downfield to help make another block on a big run play, or sprinting down the field behind Fernando Mendoza and then being able to fall on a loose ball to keep possession with Indiana. It's something as simple as that. It's not rocket science. It isn't. It's something as simple as giving maximum effort on every play, treating every play the same regardless of the competitive circumstances. It's not rocket science. Although for some teams it is. Being disciplined, handling adversity well. These are all things that, at least as far as I and everyone else on this planet know, you can't cheat that. You just can't. I don't know how you could cheat responding well to adversity, right? Is there some magic pill that Fernando Mendoza took after throwing a pick six against Oregon back in October? Is there some magic elixir that he drank after being sacked on the opening drive against Alabama? Oh, I guess there is. I guess Indiana's cheating, right? Is there some magic elixir that Daniel Ndukwe took to force a fumble and sack Dante Moore twice against Oregon in the Peach Bowl? I guess. I guess so. Or maybe Indiana's just really freaking tired of all the doubters. Really tired of the goalposts being moved at every turn. Curt Cignetti maybe was really tired of people telling him that he couldn't do this at Indiana. Because he has said this repeatedly, that when he got in the building, he detected a sense of doom and gloom, and that the program was dead. People saying, oh, you can't win here. You can't do this. Indiana stinks. Obviously, you can't win there, just because nobody else had done it before at a high level, consistently, sustaining it. And Cignetti says, man, why not? Why not Indiana, right? Why not Indiana? Now they're a win away from the national championship and being the first 16-0 team in over 100 years. Since Yale in the late 19th century. We're going to go back to the days of maybe even before leather helmets. That's a long time ago. But no. Sorry, guys. Bunch of schizos on Twitter say that Indiana's cheating, so I guess it's over. Fantasy ride's done. No. And anybody who actually knows anything about football will be able to break this down, exactly how Indiana has done what they've done this season and the last 2 years. The last 2 years for Indiana. It starts with Curt Cignetti having a very astute eye for talent. Having a system in place that has worked everywhere he's been. Everywhere he's been. Google him, right? Google him. What did he do at IU, Pennsylvania? He won. He took that program out of the gutter. He won at Elon. He won at James Madison. He led them from the FCS to the FBS. Oh, yeah, no, I guess he was cheating at all of those stops, too. He's won everywhere he's been. Maybe it's a system that works. Maybe it's a system that works. And again, anybody else could have hired him. Wisconsin could have hired him. Instead, they picked Luke Fickell. They could have. Cincinnati could have hired him. Instead, they hired Scott Satterfield. Wisconsin passed on him because he didn't have any Power 4 experience. Yeah, because that has been such a detriment for Cignetti in Indiana, right? But Cignetti came in and he said, hey, I feel like I've done this turnaround a few times. There were some skeptics. People said, oh, well, but you haven't done it in the Big Ten. Cignetti learned under the tutelage of Nick Saban. The same coach that mentored all 4 coaches in the playoff semifinals, including but not limited to one, Dan Lanning, and Mario Cristobal. I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't understand why at every turn Indiana has people trying to find new ways to discredit them instead of watching what is actually unfolding before their eyes and just appreciating it for what it is. The Peach Bowl, Indiana fans taking over in Atlanta. Some people will try to tell you, oh, well, I guess you just started watching football in 2024. But we all know in Bloomington, throughout the state of Indiana, that that's not the case. People maybe didn't go to the games because, well, you'd have to spend time and money to watch what, for a long time, was a subpar product. And if the university wasn't invested in it at the highest level, then why should you be? That's a very fair outlook to have, but that doesn't mean we didn't watch the games. That doesn't mean people didn't care. It's just that now people have a reason to experience this once-in-a-lifetime ride for Indiana, something that has been decades in the making. Think about the vision that Terry Hepner had for Indiana. The way that he tried to rally the students, rally the fan base, get them to come to Memorial Stadium and watch Indiana. And although his vision was ultimately cut short, of course, by cancer, I'd like to think that Terry Hepner is smiling down upon IU football right now because this is what he thought was possible. And, you know, you think about the moments from this year, all the things that have stacked up and led now to Indiana being on the verge of the national championship, of winning the national championship. You think about even the bad moments. Week 1, Colton Joseph, first play from scrimmage is a 75-yard touchdown run. Oof. But then Indiana figured it out. The first win wasn't pretty. They got better week over week. Illinois comes to town and boom. Magical. D'Angelo Pons, punt block, touchdown. The rest is history, right? Started raining in the fourth quarter. Right as the fourth quarter started. And I was on the field shooting the game. And I'm looking around. I've got a video camera and, you know, I was shooting a little bit of it, but I'm just looking around. They were playing Mr. Brightside, and the student section was packed. Nobody left. Student section was packed to the gills again. There was a nervous energy before the game, but by that point, the result was well decided. And people were singing along to Mr. Brightside, jumping around, having a great time. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, man, this is special. And you know, those are the kinds of moments. I knew it at that moment, at that time. Those are the kinds of things that you remember for the rest of your life. You think about Iowa, Kinnick Stadium, very tough place to play. It was hot. Fernando Mendoza throws a late interception, thinking, oh no. Drew Stevens misses the kick. Okay, there's a chance. Then Mendoza finds Surratt, throws straight into the face of a zero blitz, and Surratt takes it about 50 yards to the house. Holy cow, they're going to beat Iowa. That was the first hurdle they had in 2021. They couldn't do it. They did it in 2025. Then the bye week. Anticipation builds. Oregon. I'm calling that game on the roof of Autzen Stadium, thinking, please just give me a close second half, because that was the half where I had play-by-play. And Brendan Franke drills a 58-yarder to give Indiana a 13-10 lead going into the locker room. Okay, there's a chance. 30 minutes is a long time. And then Indiana picks off Dante Moore twice after taking the lead on a touchdown pass from Mendoza to Surratt. Holy cow, they're going to do it. And I remember going down onto the field at Autzen after that game, and everybody was stunned. Indiana fans, Indiana media, Oregon fans, of course, Oregon media, everybody absolutely flummoxed. Completely bewildered at what had just taken place. It didn't even feel real. It did not feel real what happened in Eugene on October 11th. Just ridiculous. Ridiculous. And I'm sitting on the field. Once the buzz has died down, I'm thinking, what did we just watch? It felt like some sort of fantasy, I guess. And you move on from there. Homecoming win against Michigan State in very interesting weather conditions. It was overcast. Wind was whipping around. There were severe thunderstorms in the area. Halftime extended about 5 extra minutes, but Fernando Mendoza was slinging the rock. At the rock. Nearly 350 yards. 4 touchdown passes for him. UCLA, I was shooting that game. First play from scrimmage is an Aiden Fisher tip drill pick 6. Actually, it wasn't tipped. It was not tipped. Nico Iamaleava just threw the ball right to him. And Indiana blew him out. Alberto Mendoza had a rushing touchdown in that game. Penn State comes around. And I did not go to Happy Valley for that game. That was the one game I didn't go to because I was calling the Indiana Marquette game the next day. But I'm watching that game on TV, and I had actually started to write my recap that Indiana had lost before that game ended. Silly me. Mendoza to Cooper, of course, well documented. That was the last real hurdle for them. You're like, okay, they're going undefeated now. They are. The next week was senior day. 6 straight games in 6 weeks. They were banged up, but Indiana had the pregame celebrations, packed house, of course, and there was a little bit of tension in the first half because it was 10-7 at halftime. I was calling that game, and I'm looking out, and there were some boo birds, but Indiana pulled away in the third quarter. And I remember looking around and thinking, shoot, man, we went from 4 overtimes against Akron, needing a game-winning drive to beat a subpar Illinois team, needing overtime and a blocked field goal and a miracle to beat Western Kentucky my first 2 years here. We went from that to there not being a vacant bleacher in the entire stadium in my time as a student. And I was looking around Memorial Stadium, and, I'm not a very emotional person, but there was a lip quiver or two on senior day when I was looking around because I'm just thinking, man, this is my last game here as a student, and this has been some sort of magic carpet ride that I don't want to end. Then the bye week, and Indiana wins the bucket at Purdue the following week. And even though the regular season came to a close and they went undefeated, you knew that there was still so much ahead of them, and the players did too. Yeah, we went undefeated. Everything we want is still out there. Indiana wins the Big Ten title against Ohio State. That was another hurdle that a lot of people didn't think was possible, just because Ohio State was unblemished at that point, just like Indiana was. But that throw to Charlie Becker that Fernando Mendoza made to seal it, that was it. And you're thinking, holy cow, Indiana's going to be number 1. And even then, it still felt like there was more out there, because there was. But he had some time to think about it. You had the layoff, nearly a month before the Rose Bowl, which was, as we know, a full circle moment, because Indiana football had not been to the Rose Bowl to play in the Rose Bowl game since 1968. It was the 1967 season, but the 1968 Rose Bowl against USC, losing 14-3. That was the O.J. Simpson USC team. And then they make it back. And you're in Pasadena, and it's New Year's Day. And I'm thinking, okay, the last time we were here, it was September, and Indiana was playing UCLA, and it was a nice thing being at the stadium, but holy cow, they're playing in the real thing. And then they win the game in blowout fashion, and Curt Cignetti leads a Hoosiers chant on the stage, covered in rose petals, and you hear the response from the Indiana fans, and Cignetti showing emotion. That tells you how much that meant. Obviously not just to the fan base, but to him. As we know, Cignetti, stone-faced, never shows any emotion. Except he did in Pasadena. He said, it'd make a heck of a movie, this story. I don't think anybody would buy this movie script. I think it's too perfect. I really do. I don't think you could sell a studio on the idea of this exact thing happening. But that is what's happening, and that's what makes it so amazing. And I remember looking around in Pasadena because, there was a chance for rain during the game, and ultimately the rain held off, and the skies cleared up by the end of it. And we got to see a little bit of the Rose Bowl sunset, even though Indiana won the game so quickly that we missed the sunset during the game. You could still see a little bit of it after the game, during the celebrations. And seeing the IU fans there take over the Rose Bowl was incredible. And then, of course, the Peach Bowl a couple days ago in Atlanta. And just the sheer volume of IU fans. The street by Mercedes-Benz Stadium looked like Kirkwood during Little Five weekend. There were so many bars. They were all packed to the gills. 95% Indiana fans. There was this buzz in the stadium. It was so loud. I said this during the first hour. It was so loud. The D'Angelo Pons pick 6. I'm sitting in the open-air press box. By the way, phenomenal press box at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's a shame that most of the time it's used to cover Falcons games. Phenomenal press box there. Open air. Deafening. I think, you know how when you're listening to something and the volume maxes out, you hear it clip, right? If you're looking at it, the audio levels, say in Adobe Premiere or something like that, you'll see red because it's maxed out. That's what the stadium sounded like. It sounded like somebody had the microphones a little too hot. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, holy crap, they're actually going to go to the national championship, aren't they? And they did. And I just every single thing, outside of Oregon's second drive, the first sustained possession for the Ducks, they had nothing. They had nothing in the first half. Indiana bending and breaking Oregon's defense at will. It's hard to beat a good team twice. Indiana did it. And looking around and listening to the cheers, being on the field when the confetti was shot off and Cignetti lifted the trophy. Elijah Surratt had a big old Chick-fil-A hat on his head. Of course, it is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And the players celebrating with their families in the stands and just what this means to everybody involved. It's ridiculous. And I don't know. Nobody knows what the future holds beyond this year for Indiana football. But the memories that IU football players, fans, staffers, coaches, even the media, for us in our little corner, right? Even the memories that we've made, these will last a lifetime. I don't know that any job, any assignment, regardless of what I do after graduating here in about 4 months, I don't know that anything is going to compare to what Indiana has done during my time covering this team. And I know, as a media member, you never want to make it about yourself. And I obviously, this would have happened regardless of whether or not I was in the press box over the last 2 years and change, or on the field, or wherever, covering games. But the timing working out as well as it has, it's luck, right? It's luck. But, I'm not going to be here next Sunday because I'll be in Miami covering the lead up to the national championship game. And regardless of what happens from here on out, whether Indiana wins or loses the national championship, whether Indiana becomes a dynasty like Alabama, wins back-to-back like Georgia, right, or never makes it back here again, I'm going to, I know, remember this run, this ride, this rise of Indiana football for the rest of my life. And there's been so much pain and so much heartbreak. Obviously, as a media member, you're not a fan. I grew up an IU fan, though. I grew up in Indianapolis. I've lived in Indiana my entire life. And it's been a lot of pain, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of close but never close enough, right? You think of the Foster Farms Bowl. You think of the Pinstripe Bowl. The kick was good, by the way. The kick was good. You think about the Outback Bowl in 2020. You think about Indiana's best season, highest rankings this generation being in 2020 when there were very few, if any, fans in attendance. There was always some caveat to Indiana's success before this season, right? Oh, they won 11 games last year, but they couldn't beat the biggest juggernauts in college football. Michigan had a down year, then they went to Ohio State, and it was never close. Okay, it was close after the first drive. I was thinking after the Tyson Lawton touchdown run that Indiana may have a chance in that game, and that disappeared very quickly. But they iterated on that. They got better. And everything has lined up so perfectly, not because of some gift or because of any sort of extracurricular influence, but because they have earned everything that they've gotten to this point. And again, regardless of what happens at Hard Rock Stadium on Monday, January 19th, this is going to be something that nobody will ever forget. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you, and there's one more game left in the Indiana football season. Now we know that for a fact. Indiana-Miami, the national championship, one of the biggest tickets in college football history. The get-in price, just about $3,000. That's, well, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. The tale of the tape is that, well, Miami has lost twice. Indiana has not. Hurricanes 13-2 on the season. Their biggest wins this year over Notre Dame week 1. Remember when South Florida was a dark horse for the college football playoff? Miami blew them out. That was on the CW and probably one of the higher profile games that the CW has ever had for college football. They blew out Florida in Gainesville, at home. They beat Florida State on the road, lost to Louisville at home, lost on the road to SMU, blew out Pitt in the final week of the regular season, and then in the college football playoff, Miami 10-3 over Texas A&M. That was an ugly, low-scoring affair, partly because there was a lot of wind in College Station, which made kicking field goals very difficult. The over-under was 48.5, and the teams combined for 13 points. Miami scored a late touchdown in the fourth quarter to seal it. Miami then, of course, beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. The big play from that game was a pick six from Keontae Scott. He jumped in front of a screen pass that was telegraphed by Ohio State and took it to the house from 72 yards out. Ohio State lost to Miami 24-14. And then Miami took care of Ole Miss and Pete Golding and Trinidad Chambliss in the semifinal. That was the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. Now Miami gets to play in its home stadium at Hard Rock for the national championship. It's the first time since Miami did it 25 years ago that a team has played in its home stadium for the national championship. Although, despite that, I would not be surprised if there were more Indiana fans there than Hurricane fans. Mostly because Miami struggles to fill up its stadium during the regular season. That's the rationale behind that. Although, of course, Miami is looking to return to national prominence for the first time in about 20 years. So, a lot to, of course, play for, obviously. It's a national championship game. But two programs looking to establish themselves as the undisputed number one. Miami, led by veteran quarterback Carson Beck, who, of course, transferred over in the offseason from Georgia. Beck suffered a UCL tear in the postseason last year. Gunnar Stockton took his place. Beck initially declared for the NFL draft and then said, actually, I'm going to go back to school. Carson Beck is no stranger to the college football world. He's been around for a long time. He's been playing since 2020. He redshirted his first season, took his first snaps in 2021. Beck has thrown for over 3,500 yards this year, second time in the last 3 years that he has done exactly that. Beck, 73.3% completion for 3,581 yards, 29 touchdowns, 11 picks. He's taken 17 sacks in 15 games. So let's see. Efficient, smart with the ball, doesn't turn the ball over all that much, doesn't take a lot of sacks. Sounds familiar. Those are all hallmarks of Fernando Mendoza. Mendoza a little bit less on the volume side, about 200 yards less than Carson Beck in the same amount of games. Rushing game, led by 1,000-yard rusher Mark Fletcher. Indiana also now has a 1,000-yard rusher in Roman Hemby. Mark Fletcher, 20 yards more on the season than Roman Hemby, Fletcher averaging 5.4 yards per carry, along with 56, 10 touchdowns on the season for Mark Fletcher, who had the game-winning touchdown against Texas A&M back in the first round of the playoff. Roman Hemby, by comparison, averaging 5 yards on the nose per carry. And then in the receiving game, the freshman phenom Malachi Toney, who has been nothing short of spectacular for the Hurricanes this season. He had 81 yards and a touchdown catch against Ole Miss in the playoff, in the semifinal at the Fiesta Bowl. And Toney on the season has been, again, phenomenal. Miami's leading receiver, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdown catches to lead all Hurricanes receivers. Keelan Marion also up there, 740 receiving yards, a couple touchdowns for him. C.J. Daniels as well, 7 touchdown catches, just under 500 yards through the air for him. So, this Miami team on offense, very balanced. Very balanced. And Malachi Toney, a Miami native, will probably be matched up one-on-one with D'Angelo Pons, which Pons actually did a very good job. Despite what the box score will tell you, Pons did a great job of shutting down Jeremiah Smith as much as he could, as much as anyone can. I don't know that there is a single defensive back on the planet who could shut down Jeremiah Smith, hold him receptionless, hold him completely quiet for an entire game. I don't know that that's going to happen. Certainly not at the college level. And what's scary about Smith is he still has one more year. But D'Angelo Pons did a really good job of limiting him, limiting his impact. He's going to have to do the same against fellow Miami native Malachi Toney. And Miami's defense is scary too. Extremely scary. As is any defense that you're going to face in a national championship. It's not exactly rocket science, right? Not rocket science. Obviously, the big man on the defensive line is Ruben Bain. Bain, also a Miami native. Man, there are a lot of Miami natives in this game. Not surprising by any means, but a lot of hometown guys. Bain, 8.5 sacks. 8.5 sacks. He's got an interception as well. Akeem Mesidor, also a game wrecker in the backfield, 10.5 sacks for him. And this Miami defense, Corey Heatherman was a former Curt Cignetti defensive coordinator. And he's taken his success to the highest level as well. 2 DBs to watch out for, 2 ball hawks, Bryce Fitzgerald with 6, Jacoby Thomas with 5, including a pick 6. Keontae Scott, 2 pick 6s for Keontae Scott. Yeah, this Miami defense is as advertised. I mean, you don't hold Texas A&M to 3 points by accident. You don't do it. You just don't do that. You cannot fluke your way to the national championship game. Despite Miami not making the ACC title game because tiebreakers are stupid, somehow it was Duke versus Virginia. Miami is a force on the defensive front. These teams, Indiana and Miami, 1 and 2 nationally in sacks. Miami 47, Indiana 45. Both teams have played the same amount of games, so raw numbers, volume, it stacks up no matter how you look at it. It stacks up no matter what way you slice it. These defensive fronts are the 2 best in the country. Also, 2 of the best secondaries in the country, both top 15 in interceptions, Indiana with 18, Miami with 16. It's going to be a phenomenal matchup. Absolutely phenomenal. And I can't believe that Indiana is part of it. Usually these are the games that you dream of, right? These are the opportunities that you hope that you get once in a lifetime, right? To prove yourself, to beat the absolute best of what's remaining in college football. These defenses also, 2 of the top 5 scoring defenses. Indiana second nationally, 11.1 points per game. Miami 5th at 14 points allowed per game. Now, the last time Indiana faced a defense this good was Ohio State. And what did it take? It took near perfection. Near perfection. But Fernando Mendoza and company have shown the ability to rise to those occasions and play at their absolute best when they have to, especially late. You think about the game-winning drives that Mendoza's led this season. Iowa, Oregon, Penn State. Go-ahead touchdown drive in the fourth quarter, or excuse me, it may have been the third quarter against Ohio State. It was in the second half that Indiana took the lead. And then from there, you just do what you've done all season, right? You limit the self-inflicted mistakes. The game-winning touchdown drives, a couple of those coming after self-inflicted mistakes. i.e. interceptions on, ill-advised throws. But notwithstanding how Indiana ended up in those situations, the Hoosiers were able to overcome them, and that is the key. These teams both lean on their defenses a little bit more than I'd say their offenses, right? It's not like they're high-flying Pac-12 offenses by any means. That said, though, Indiana is one of the best rushing offenses in the country, averaging 218 yards per game, which ranks in the top 15. So, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Lean on the ground game. Go to the air when you like it, but Miami's secondary is going to make that very, very difficult. I don't think that Indiana is going to make any excuses. You know, some people on the outside looking in are saying, well, how is it fair that Miami gets to play a national championship game in their home stadium? Well, the site of the game was determined well before this season, and Miami has earned the right to be there. That's great. Good for them. But I don't think Indiana's going to look at that and say, oh, no, this is not fair, this is rigged, we demand a recount, because that is not the kind of mindset that this team has. Pat Coogan, Indiana's veteran center, has a chance to right the wrongs. He transferred from Notre Dame after last year, and if you remember last year, Notre Dame lost to Ohio State in the national championship game in none other than Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Indiana played in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Pat Coogan, starting center, made some key plays, key hustle plays, high-effort plays. Helped keep Fernando Mendoza's jersey clean. He was sacked just one time. In that same building where his Notre Dame career came to a close, and he was subsequently cast off by Marcus Freeman and his staff, making it clear, hey, we value you more for your locker room presence than for your on-field play. His Notre Dame career ends with a loss in that building. He transfers to Indiana, and nearly 365 days later, he leads his team to a win in that same building to clinch a spot in the national championship game. Coogan has a chance to finish his college career on the highest of highs after being unwanted by a team that he helped galvanize through his pregame speeches and play on the field and get them to a national championship game last year. And, of course, Coogan, humble as you'll find anywhere, saying that, well, being in back-to-back national championships means that he's been blessed with great teammates and great coaching staffs, and that's the kind of guy that he is. But that's the kind of guy that Indiana was looking to bring in, somebody who was no stranger to these kinds of stages, who knows what it takes to succeed, who has even had to handle failure on those stages. It's exactly what they got in Pat Coogan. I expect them to lean a lot on his experience, but also Coogan's mindset is, well, once you line it up on the 120-yard by 52.5-yard field, it's the same. It's just that it's another game. And that's the mindset that permeates this entire Indiana team. Should be a very awe-inspiring matchup, one for the ages, no question about it. Indiana-Miami national championship game on Monday, January 19th, 7:30, 4:30 Pacific. It is going to be phenomenal. Indiana favored by 7.5 points. I don't know about that. Moneyline Indiana minus 310, Miami plus 250. Again, those odds seem a little lopsided. I think Miami is going to present a new challenge for Indiana, but at the same time, Indiana's faced a lot of new challenges this year, and they've overcome every single one. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. Again, this is the latest that anybody has ever gone without putting a ton of thought into IU basketball, it feels like. Indiana played yesterday in basketball, hosted number 10 Nebraska, and if the IU Athletics social media presence was any indication, they were really trying to get fans into the seats. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Well, not in vain, I would say, but did not influence the ultimate outcome of the game. Indiana blew a 16-point lead and lost to number 10 Nebraska, 83-77. The Hoosiers now 12-4 on the season, 3-2 in conference play, and things are only going to get more difficult for Darren DeVries and Indiana men's basketball because after this, Indiana faces 4 of its next 5 opponents who are ranked. I could have phrased that better. 4 of Indiana's next 5 opponents are ranked in the top 20. Michigan State on the road at the Breslin Center. At home against Iowa, number 19. On the road at the Chrysler Center against number 2 Michigan. the day after the national championship in football. That's January 20th. At Rutgers. Rutgers is terrible. And then at home against Purdue on January 27th. Oof. Well, we've established that Indiana had chances at-large resume-boosting wins, missed out on those chances. And now, well, you're going to have to play spoiler at some point. Indiana could have done it, had a great opportunity to do it yesterday, ultimately came up short. Indiana led by as much as 16 points, 51-35 early in the second half. And from there, Nebraska just didn't go away, refused to go away. Indiana stretched it back out to 6 points with about 8.5 to go, 65-59, and the lead disappeared shortly thereafter. Nebraska tied it at 65, and then Indiana went frigid from the floor for the rest of the game. Frigid. And again, when you have an opportunity, that was Nebraska, as we know, undefeated, top of the Big Ten, 16-0 now. But that's one of the first times this year Nebraska's been on the ropes. One of the first times. The first time they did it was actually against Kansas State in a neutral site game, shortly before Indiana played Kansas State. Other close calls for Nebraska, a 7-point win over Winthrop, but Indiana struggled with Winthrop last year, so there's that. Close win on the road, 3 points over Illinois. Illinois, very, very good team as well. And then a low-scoring affair at home against Michigan State. 3-point win on the road against Ohio State. And again, Nebraska ball escaped, beat Indiana. Jamarcus Lawrence, career-high 27 points for him. Rink Mast had 13 and 6 for the Huskers. Indiana close, but no cigar. Can't, dare I say, get over the hump. But the Hoosiers on the hardwood will have another opportunity to do just that coming up on Tuesday against Michigan State. And if you think back to last year, Tom Izzo had a chance to pass Bob Knight's record for the most wins in the Big Ten, and Indiana was the game that Michigan State was on track to do it. Michigan State ranked in the top 15 at that time, and Indiana went on the road and beat him because there was no way that Mike Woodson was going to let Izzo break Bob Knight's record. No real historical implications this time around, but Indiana perhaps with some good mojo, although none of the scholarship players on that roster last year are on this team. But you never know. You never know. Could be one of those if I had a nickel type situations where it's not a lot, but it's weird that Indiana's upset Michigan State twice in 2 years on the road. It could happen. It could happen. That's going to do it for IU Sports Sunday this week. Again, I will not be here next week. I will be in Miami covering the national championship game. I hope. I haven't gotten confirmation that a flight is booked just yet, but I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later because I think the flights are only going up. You can follow along with all of my coverage and the Hoosier Network's coverage at Nick Rotacap on Twitter. The Hoosier Network on Twitter, it's the Hoosier Net. All one word on the handle, of course. Written stories, podcasts. We can't shoot the games, but we can do darn near everything else. If you're driving out there, the roads might still be a little slick. Try to stay warm, try to stay safe. Indiana and Miami in the national championship game with a shot at college football immortality. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday.